who requested anonymity, said.
Yeah. Okay, recording has started. All right. Hi, this is Greg Young.
And this is Bill Malik. And you're listening to Real Cybersecurity. So, how does it feel to have your feet back on good old Canadian soil?
Always good. Travel nowadays is complicated still, less about pandemic-y things and more about inefficiency of airlines. And they've scraped down all possible inefficiencies and efficiencies to make things as unpleasant as possible. So thank you.
Mm.
I wish them well in their profiteering. And I'm not sure where this is going to take us, but we're all headed there together.
Yes.
on planes with lost luggage. And
I have not had luggage lost in 2 months, which during the pandemic would mean nothing. But with the conferences and the Risk to Resilience tour that we've both been on, I've taken about 18 or 20 segments since the beginning of, the end of March, and haven't had a thing lost. Now, I did have some that were delayed. When I got to Chicago, it took about an hour and a half before the bag showed up, but that was all right.
Right.
I've adopted a new strategy. I got this humongous suitcase. I mean, it's the kind of suitcase that like a magician hides their assistant in. And I put all of my stuff in there, everything that I travel with. I have a whoop-de-doo diet regimen where I use protein powder in the morning as a breakfast. And so I take that and I take the thing that I use to mix the powder in. I put all of this stuff in there, and it's even with 4 days of clothing and all of that, it's not quite full. So I start putting in an extra coat just so it doesn't rattle around too much.
Yeah.
But it's great because it is so huge and so ugly and so rigid, but not rigid, strong, that it comes trundling out there, and it's like I can hear it from two aisles over when the bag shows up. It's kind of handy.
Yeah. I appreciate your intellect differentiating between rigid and strong. That was a great insight into your IQ there. I like that.
Well, the thing is made out of a very thick plastic, but it's the kind of plastic that they use to make like zip ties out of.
Right.
So when you sit on it, it'll flex, but it won't break. I mean, it's a willow, not an oak, if you're familiar with that metaphor.
Yeah.
So it'll crumple a little bit. I mean, it's called a hard side. It's not by any means soft-sided, but it's just delightful. And it's don't need to mention the brand, but the thing weighs about 2.5 pounds, and it's got about 6 or 7 cubic feet of space. So it's just ideal.
Enough room for the magician's assistant. Yeah, the interesting part about the travel now, and of course, there's going to be the naysayers who go, "Oh, never check a bag," and that's a rule of thumb. But if you're doing a lot of segments together, as you were, you have to check a bag. You can't do hotel laundry for all of that and the like. So it's actually a good rule in security is, you can put all your eggs in one basket, but just watch that basket, right? So there's
right. And in fact, that is a way to consider risk remediation. Both strategies are valid. They both have different costs. A big, heavy bag like this delays your exit from the airport, but it also means you're going to have everything. I don't think I may have shared this anecdote with you, but when I was a kid, we lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Ann Arbor has just some wonderful geographic features. There's the Huron River, which flows east towards Detroit and then out into Lake St. Clair, I guess, is the one there. Anyway, it's a wonderful, beautiful river, especially for kids, because the thing's about 8 to 15 feet wide and 2 to 3 feet deep, and it's got a sandy bottom, and it's got little islands, and there are little bridges that go. I mean, it's almost like a kid's playground, We had all the little things we'd plan. And my sister, who's 2.5 years younger than I, and my parents would go there, have a picnic. And inevitably, either I or my sister would fall into the river at some point. Right. At a minimum, the shoes and socks, often the pants, sometimes everything would be just drenched. And so my folks, they always would bring a towel, but we began a new routine, which was you'd always bring in an extra set of fall in the river clothes, right? So if I'm going on a 4-day trip, I'll bring 5 days worth of clothing, because that way, if I'm on the way to the speech and somebody bumps into me and I spill coffee all over my one good shirt,
Right.
I don't have to do the pitch in a Star Wars T-shirt or a Hawaiian shirt. I can go back up to the room and show up in a nice, crisp. And I learned how to fold clothes so they don't do that. With a sports coat, you invert it. You turn it so the um, inside top of the shoulders are together. Fold at one time. And although the collar will look a little strange, even after 2 days in luggage, if you hang it up overnight, suit coat looks great. Doesn't have any creases on the main part. Looks great. So I've got all these techniques. I have a mantra for what I do to pack. This is actually group therapy for cybersecurity people, folks, in case you were tuned in late. having these rubrics, these rules of thumb, these things, shoes, socks, underpants, undershirt, pants, shirt, belt, jacket, tie, shaving kit. I say that I've been saying that since the early 80s whenever I pack. And I just say, okay, yeah, got everything. I've never written down, I've never tried to create an acronym out of it. It would sound like a snake. But having that, this is the point about strategy. If you have a strategy and you take feedback, then over time, your strategy will get better. It will. With experience, it'll get better. If you don't have a strategy, then every time as a guest, it's level 1 on the capability maturity model. You just keep guessing. Cybersecurity has to get to level 3, folks. Repeatable processes, comprehensive documentation, mentoring, education, training. And you made a comment in the earlier thing that I'd like to pick up on, which is the terrible quality of education in cybersecurity. And that's probably worth a whole session just in itself. But I was going to ask, what exactly would you call out as being the more disappointing trends in cybersecurity education these days?
It's a lot of overlapping circles. So the inability to understand what is needed to prepare an entry-level person in the business. So too often it is organizations, institutions putting these training plans together who have no nexus at all to what the real business world requires. They're going off of broad assumptions. For funding agencies, often they're going, of course, with relationships or lowest cost compliant based on these bad criteria. And I'm not saying it has to be high priced, it's just the nexus to reality. And the next is the price of the training is just crippling for somebody coming out of college or high school. And they're immediately placed in large amounts of debt. So I saw one recently where it was a 30K program, and there was a convenient way that all of the debt would be, handled for them. They wouldn't have to pay anything. But the terms did not seem favorable. The training, as I saw it, did not produce a usable certification at the end. So you've got these optimistic, enthusiastic, people who want to get into the business, and they're being treated like our businesses are being treated by the ransomware, groups. They're put in a ransom, put into debt, treated poorly, and they've wasted time and probably lose their enthusiasm as part of it. So we're not good at the entry level side, quite frankly, up and down the stack, with the exception of some skill sets. I think organizations like SANS do a fantastic job on some of the advanced, particularly training. But outside of that, for the other roles in the organization, where's the training? It's on the job. I just passed the anniversary of, I think today's, or this month, I think is my 10th anniversary since I let my SysIP lapse. So there was, that's another topic about letting that why that was not delivering any value, and it could have. They failed to the IC squared has failed to innovate with that. They've just used it to print money, especially on the backs of new people entering, which is a fine role, but missed opportunity more than is my greatest criticism of where you could have taken this. So forcing me to keep my, fill out just an abominable web form to recertify every year and send money. It's not the money part. It was the, really, been about 20 years of this.
Yeah.
I got 35 years in the business. You're making me do this again. How about, is there another way I can happily pay the dues, but get some value back for what this should be, and not make it annoying to me, but make it some value. Even engage me in the process somehow. I would be happy to help out. Reach out to your membership, use them, but just annoying me and making me pay money is not a good business model.
Right, and and there's a unfortunate cycle in place there, because small to mid-sized enterprises can't stand up their own training programs, right? So they offload it. They'll outsource the education of their people to these various training institutions, and some of them are good. I mean, the classes at the SANS Institute are fantastic, but HR says we got to have training. Corporate budget dictates we can't afford to do it in-house, so we got to do it outside. And then they start doing price shopping on the training, and you end up funding these nonsensical programs. And I let my CISA lapse about 5 or 6 years ago for exactly that reason. And I value the in-service, I really do. But if I've developed presentations for the ISACA Big Three conferences, at least one a year for the past 5 or 10 years, there should be kind of a short form saying we're doing this. And it turns out, if you look at the U.S. federal government database of where there are jobs in information security, they actually will break it down by state, and they'll put you in touch with the state agencies that have it. It's a very nice map. You'll find that in those jobs, the most highly sought after certification turns out to be the CISA, the ISACA Certified Information Systems Auditor.
Right.
But and this pains me to say, because I love ISACA. They've done beautiful things. They own the CMMI, which I'm a huge fan of. They created COBIT, which I think is one of the most brilliant innovations, right up there with TOVAC and ITIL. But I asked the president, how many people have been fired, had their certifications pulled because of a breach of ethics?
Right.
Because you got 16,000 people. And the answer was nobody, ever.
Yeah.
And it's like, we disbar lawyers. We deny physicians the right to practice due to, malpractice. But if you got 15,000 people in a population that spans, typically an average year, that spans decades, you'd think at least one of them would have done something. I mean, look at the TJX breach, right? They had the biggest PCI audit firm in-house across the period of time that breach took place. And it went on for 18 months? Their own team didn't find it. The team that was giving them the PCI compliance at the highest level didn't find it. And nobody was fired. Nobody in the audit firm was dinged. Nobody lost a certification. So it's like there's this weird, like, Stockholm syndrome between the organizations that provide subadequate training and weak certifications, coupled with the HR and purchasing organizations, which want to be able to say our people are certified, but they don't really want to, fork over the money to either develop their own program or actually do any meaningful QA on the programs they're outsourcing. It's like hiring the cheapest astrologist on the planet and building your retirement plan based on your horoscope. It just doesn't seem a fundamental disconnect. Wow, that was a big rant.
But a good one, and you're on the money there. Like, even lower the bar more and say, somebody who's committed criminal acts, you know,
Mhm.
has turned out to be an attacker, you know, and was convicted and jailed. You got to be at least one.
You're right. There's got to
I
be
could Google
somebody
it.
out there.
We can Google it, and we don't need AI for that. We can Google, use the Google, and we can find somebody who's been jailed that has that certification. We can cross-link. We'll use AI to cross-link between LinkedIn and
And court records.
court records and you know, in the database for, you know, CISO or ISC squared. So yeah, I just got up from my chair for one moment there and looked, and it was 2000. I got my CISO. So by the
Okay.
way, for somebody coming into the business, get it if you can. No criticism there. It's just for people as you advance, as you go along in your career, the value of that, it's just, it became negative for me. So
And that's exactly my experience. I helped build the exam back in the late 90s, and I took it, and I got I think that year the highest score was 100. They sometimes vary it. If it turns out there was a question that in retrospect is ambiguous, they'll throw it out. But out of a possible 100, I think I got a 92 on that exam. So I did well, and I finished 20 minutes early. So I had plenty of time to check the work. So yeah, do take it, because what you learn in the process of getting ready for the exam is invaluable. I took uh, training with the ISACA chapter in Albany, New York. They had the former head of internal audit for Disney teaching the class. And I heard him
oh
speak.
wow.
I mean, you couldn't have had a better person. He was folksy, he was down home, it was real world stuff, crucial. And it was so funny because he came in with a traditional, auditor mindset. He was head of internal audit for Disney. And one of his first things was they sent him to oversee the construction of Disney World. Right. And he went down there and he did a complete, survey, walked the site, spent days, talked with construction people, talked with foremen, talked with suppliers, talked with local law enforcement, wrote up this great big report. And then he was asked to deliver his report to the board. And so he came up with a 1-page summary, very, very fine print. And the board asked one question: will it open on time?
Huh.
I said, yes, yes. It's, we're concerned about the fact that these fences aren't high enough and there's, lumber near the gates. And they said, yeah, will it open on time? And he goes, yes. And after his third board meeting, when they only had one question, he realized what they were concerned about.
Right.
One of the other war stories he told, and this is just a testament to how effective that training was. When he got to work at Disney, they had a big problem in that people were taking home their room keys. That was back in the day when the keys were actually, these big, beautiful physical keys with a Disney
Right.
logo. I think it was Mickey's traditional, head outline on the key. And so people would take the keys home. And he looked at that and he said, my God, we've got all these rooms with multiple keys being issued. And it was that analysis that led Disney to start using the mag stripe key readers for doors.
Hmm.
You check out, you can take the thing. It's got the Disney logo. It's a nice souvenir, but you can't use it after you check out. And there were some, troubling high-profile incidents where people were assaulted in their rooms at a Disney hotel, and that was cited as one of the contributing factors. And so he made a huge positive impact. But that kind of experience, we call it training. What it was applied mentoring. And that's the kind of thing you'll get out of ISC squared. That's the kind of thing you'll get out of SANS. That's the kind of thing that makes training worthwhile. But when it's studying for a test just to pass the test, it becomes as meaningless as, the regents in New York State or the ACT. And yeah, it's problematic because, HR wants to do word matching. They want to do a search for keywords and acronyms. And so, yeah, if you're new in the business, you will need to get a couple of those. But as quickly as you can, attach yourself to somebody who really knows what's going on, and you'll be much happier with the ultimate result.
See, you're smarter than me. See, you studied for your exam.
Well,
See,
no, I think that says that you're smarter than me.
well, I don't. Yeah, what kind of, I'm just lucky, or yeah, I didn't study for my SysUp. I just flew down to Washington, wrote the test, came back. I probably passed by a point or something, or they took some charity on me. But I figured, I've been working. This was 2000. I'd already been working in the field for 12 years. And I thought, well, if I can't pass this, I shouldn't be in the business then. That was my thinking at the time, was if this is an introductory sort of entry level part, and having worked since almost the start of this industry, and then I thought, well, it was arrogant. It wasn't arrogance intentionally. It was then there's a problem with the exam or with me then. So anyway, I went down, took it. My conclusion was, oh yeah, I should have studied.
Well, yeah, but to me, that says that the exam is working, because somebody who's got a decade or more experience should be able to pass the thing. A
Yeah.
person who doesn't have any experience and goes through training and looks at old tests and takes advantage of the resources will get up to speed. The challenge there is that some of their knowledge is going to be ChatGPT soi. I mean, they'll get the right words in close to the right order most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. There was the obscure questions, the obscure ones on there, the trivial ones are the ones that challenge me. But yeah. Now that I look back, my self-criticism of arrogance is reduced, because I look at the date and it was 2000, and I just come off of working on Y2K stuff. So it was
Yeah. Oh yeah, we were
Yeah.
all absorbed by that. That was actually, we were so lucky that Y2K happened. I mean, as an industry.
Had this discussion this week. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a success it was.
Yeah.
He was an Uber driver. We were talking about, he talked about his father working on Y2K, and he was kind of, had some hint of wondering whether it was all worthwhile or not. I said, no, it got fixed. It wasn't a disaster because of the effort that was put in. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Delta Airlines rewrote their entire application portfolio. It took 3 years. And they were just one. They realized that they had the Y2K problem everywhere.
Yeah.
And the initiative jump-started the Indian outsourcing industry. We just didn't have enough people who
Right.
could go in and refactor all of that stuff. But yeah, it was a huge success.
I went down a rat hole at Y2K, and I was working on a intelligence project looking at organized crime trying to exploit the Y2K situation for their own means. So I took a fairly a nice, helpful topic and worked on the dark side, of course. So
That's a fascinating, I never really thought about that, but sure, it's a huge disruption, and the bad guys are going to try to take advantage of it, of course.
yeah, because procurement was proceeding, without the usual rules. Staffing was contracts were being issued without the usual rules in banking and other critical infrastructure. So I can talk about this because it was actually one of the few intelligence projects to have a PR arm. So thanks to my colleague from the RCMP, Chuck Waring, great fellow, that he said, we got to tell people intelligence that's not shared is useless. So let's socialize the problem out there. And we had a PR aspect. It's called Project Solstice. So we went around the country talking to critical infrastructure. This is before we really talked about critical infrastructure back in the day. And This is 1999, and went to all the critical bits and talked to them about this potential problem and interacted with them. And it actually had an operational spin out as well, where there were, it wasn't just the intelligence gathering; it led to an ops side as well. But yeah, it's bad guys will do bad things. So yeah.
Yep. In fact, you reminded me, my colleague Bill Spurno. Did you know him?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he had deep connections in law enforcement, because after he was a Sacramento cop, he ended up getting into cybersecurity, and he trained more than half of the FBI agents in the late 80s and early 90s on cybersecurity. So he was able to set up a meeting with a deputy director at the FBI, a fellow named Ron Dick. And Ron took us into his office, and we spoke with him. Bill did most of the talking for about an hour on, what kinds of problems, how they would show up, what to do, and all that. Um, uh, my Y2K moment, I decided on New Year's Eve to go to the store. I was in the parking lot at the Safeway in Norwalk, Connecticut, and it was 6:58 p.m. Eastern, and I was listening to national news, And when the clock rolled over to 7 p.m. and the news came on time, I exhaled deeply for the first time in months,
Right.
because I knew if there were going to be a problem with the grid, it would happen at midnight Greenwich time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't. And it was like, oh, great. So I didn't buy 6 gallons of water.
No.
But I got stuff, and I got home and it was like, we're fine. We're okay. We had, well, probably 10 or 20 pounds of rice in the larder and 40 cans of tuna and a case of, baked beans or something,
Yeah.
just in case. Although the best line was Mike Zabore. Somebody asked him, are you going to buy a generator? He said, no, I'll get one cheap on January 2nd.
That's classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our best preparation was we took out lots of cash.
Yeah.
Because I was skeptical about the banking system because it was just so complex. I was kind of like, after all my digging and work in the business. So people said, oh, you're in the business, you should know what's going on. I said, well, yeah, but still,
Yeah.
I work in risk management. And it costs me nothing to take out a bunch of cash and I can deposit it the next day. So
Yeah, exactly. In fact, when the John Hancock, I worked there in the 70s, when they relocated their data center from the old building in Boston, the one that had that tower that would broadcast the weather forecast by a system of colored lights. They had built the tower and they were going to go with a dual data center. There was going to be the new data center on the 3rd floor of the tower, and then a second site out in the Newton Wellesley area. And there were 2 interesting challenges with that physical move. The first one was we still use the old 1401 printers, which had a mechanical print head. And there was a special slug that had the signature of the treasurer on it. And that was used for signing checks above a certain denomination. And so without that slug, without that lead insert that would go into the print wheel, you couldn't print checks, or you'd have to sign them manually. So getting that from site A to site B took an armed convoy, because the Hancock was printing millions of dollars of checks every month. And the second thing was they also had an emergency cash reserve. What if we ran out of paper?
Right.
And so there was a safe that had not 6 figures, but well into 5 figures of cash. And they ended up having to transport that to the locations. Now, it was interesting because it was a combination of physical and computer controlled, and it required admin authority to get into the thing, which meant that they actually put severe controls on even local admin. So, and if you think about what the time was like back then, I mean, this was pre-PC. You had some very interesting cyber and physical security interactions, and this was back in like 76, 77 timeframe. But again, it's, to your point, it's risk management. It's, do you want to leave a bunch of cash lying around just in case? Do you want to accept the risk and go without cash, hoping everything will work out all right? Or, how prudently do you protect those assets?
Next time you come to town here, I want to take you on a tour of the bunker, which is about two blocks from my home. The bottom floor of it, it was the Cold War bunker for in case of Dr. Strangelove scenario, when the government would go there, the select members of the government would go, and the bottom floor is where it has a giant vault where they would put the gold from the Bank of Canada was supposed to go there. Which is a lovely meeting space now, by the way, too. So because phones don't work,
Nice.
Down 5 stories in this vault, and it's a lovely area. But yeah, that's one of my neighbors is a volunteer tour guide there, and so we'll try to get James to take us on the advanced tour. It's a fascinating facility. Good security lessons throughout.
I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. We had Armed Forces Day at when I was in high school, and Fort Huachuca, which is in Sierra Vista, 24 miles basically west of where I went to high school. and that was STRATCOM,
very
Strategic
sensitive spot.
Communication.
Yes.
Right. So their Armed Forces Day included not only, being able to climb into the cargo bay of a C-5, but also to see the way they did war games. And I picked up some flyers. These were like 5x8 pieces of paper that showed a shadowy figure with a helmet and a rifle, and it said, you have been hit by the aggressor, capital, letters, big tape, big font. And the idea was in the war games that one side would be the aggressor and the other side would be the good guys. And the aggressor would try to find things. So they wouldn't, flat the tires on your truck, but they'd leave this on the seat of the truck. So it was like, you can't drive this truck now. So that was fascinating. The cat and mouse, spy versus spy stuff that went in there, which underpins what we do in computer security, right?
I got in big trouble during a war game because I was the commanding officer of the MP platoon in 11 Brigade, and we were asked to be the enemy force during one exercise, and we didn't have those flyers, but it was acceptable. I knew from Europe that you could paint a red X on a vehicle. So if you were the attacking force and you got close to it, you could sabotage. You paint a red X because you can just paint over these things with green paint. It's not like automobile paint today. These vehicles get damaged all the time. They're running into trees and barbed wire, and you can just paint over it with the green.
Right.
So my warrant officer, Warren Linnaeus, fantastic guy, said, "Oh, we just paint a red X. Okay, we'll do that." So anyway, we attacked the service battalion, and you have a in and an out route typically and everywhere in the military, right? It's like you want good flow of traffic. You don't want people driving every which way, and so in their bivouac area, you have an in route and an out route for all the supplies coming in and out.
Yep.
So we just sentries. Where's the sentry going to be watching? Probably the in route is the one he's going to be most attentive to. So we went the out route, walked up, and the guy was not paying attention because you never see people come that way. So we just walked by him and went in, painted a bunch of red X's, and the CO of the service battalion was very mad at us. Because his complaint, he was embarrassed. And that's fine. It's practice. It's exercise. It should never be an embarrassment to run an exercise and see the results. You hope to find problems you can fix. It should not be awesome. And it's not so he took it the wrong way. Number two was we also let the coffee out. We found a coffee urn that was outside the comms truck. So we emptied the coffee out. That was a great moment of sabotage, was drinking the coffee. But yeah, no, he got quite mad, and the Brigadier General Kilby found no sympathy with the light colonel from the service battalion. So he just laughed it off. So fortunately, I thought my career was one of those close to career-ending moments, but Brigadier said, paint over it and learn the lesson. So
that reminds me of one of the most poignant moments in the remake of the movie Midway,
right?
When they're wargaming the attack on Midway on the Japanese Navy flagship, and the commanding officer blows his stack at a couple of junior officers who are playing the Americans because they had the audacity to position the U.S. Navy response fleet to the northwest of Midway. And so after the attack, they sank the aircraft carriers, the Japanese. They said, they're not following the protocol,
Right.
And the admiral takes a look at all this. And he says, okay, I'm not going to embarrass my senior officer here, run it again, but pay attention to the rules. But of course, that's exactly what ended up happening.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's there was a wonderful Far Side cartoon where this is the Far West, right? And so you have the settlers, or maybe we should call them colonists now, moving west in the wagon train, and they've circled the wagons, and the indigenous peoples are on horseback attacking them. And one of the guys looks up and he sees that the arrow is on fire and it's burning the wagon. And he puts down his rifle and looks at his friend and says, they're setting fire to the arrows. Are they allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Like, it's called war. Yeah. So,
you provided a great segue into a comment that a discussion I had earlier this week. There was I was fortunate to sit on a briefing from a financial entity. I will just leave it at that, talking about their role with AI and what they've been doing with it. And the question came up about, well, how good are models at predicting sort of black swan events? And this was a very senior person, incredibly experienced and great breadth about developing economic models and things like that. And gave a really good answer, which was that they're called that for a reason, is that most models anybody has in any business are are not good at that because they're just such outliers. So they're recognized as outliers, but you can model them to a degree, but you can't say this incredibly unlikely thing will happen with likelihood at this time. You can acknowledge they're there, you can inventory them, and yes, you should pay attention to them, but predicting extremely unlikely events is not the magic. It's just understanding that they're there.
Right.
So that was a very sage comment to people expecting AI to be able to say, "Oh my goodness, there's going to be this world-ending thing that's going to happen, or this financially significant thing which is going to happen next week." If it is a true sort of super unlikely event, true black swan, it's not possible. So, and that's not what
That's right.
the tools are focused on. And I think there's a good lesson from that comment, of course, about our business that, getting on the back of the CISO about this incredibly unlikely thing that happened. But then if you get it twice, if you get hit by the supply chain based attack that was nobody foresaw or could have foreseen, yeah, those are possible. But just, fool me once, shame on me. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that reminded me of the book, The Art of the Long View. I think that was it. The fellow who used to be head of strategic planning at Shell Oil, they had a discipline which turned into the global business networks. They called it scenaric planning, portmanteau word, scenario-based planning, where what you do is you go through a series of brainstorming and then refining exercises. And the first brainstorming exercise is to imagine alternate future scenarios of any kind. So in the case of Shell Oil, it was what things could dramatically change the price of oil. And they had 20 of them. And then what you do is you take a look at that and you try to define two axes that position this into a field. And once you've got two axes for each of these 20, then you compare and contrast and say what appear to be the dominant things. And in the political set of scenarios, they had, swing towards left wing versus swing towards right wing on one axis, and then, move away from oil and move, towards increasing dependence on carbon fuels. Well, they went through this exercise, and the next step is, after you get these four possible futures, is you imagine a headline that would characterize that. And the swing towards authoritarianism and increasing dependence on oil, the headline they invented as part of their scenario planning was the collapse of the Soviet Union, replaced by, an
Right.
non-philosophically based oligarchic, basically kleptocracy, right? We're not following an ideology. We're not Marxists. We're not capitalists. We're just in it for the money. And so the price of oil goes this way. Well, when the Soviet Union collapsed a couple years later, two consequences. This first was Shell already had a scenario as to what to do about it, whereas everybody else is like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And the second thing was, some reporter got a hold of it and said that Shell Oil was able to predict the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is completely not true, but got so much airplay that it discredited the notion because it made it seem like astrology, right? It made it seem like reading the tarot cards. You can do futurology, and you can get better at it if you follow two rules. The first rule is explain the field of evidence that you see as the basis for your decision. And second is explain the chain of reasoning that gets you from here to there. And if you're right, well, celebrate. If you're wrong, you can go back and say, what did we miss in the evidence, or where was the flaw in the reasoning? And that's how you get better at doing futurology. And you and I both did this for a decade, right? You get better because you look at the consequences and take the results. The Army discriminates between lessons observed and lessons learned, right? Wow, they broke in through that door again. Well, that's a lesson observed. The point is that you can do future planning, and AI can help with the simple stuff, the construction of a headline. It can't do the hard stuff, which is to say, what are the range of possibilities? The distinction between, a closed bounded problem versus an open-ended problem. AI is terrible at open-ended problems because it'll hallucinate. It'll go all as we've talked about before. But yeah, being able to do intelligent planning that accounts for risk and takes, is aware of real world circumstances, that's not a fool's game. That's not magic. That's discipline and,
no.
academic integrity.
You remind me of one of the adages I learned in battle school, since it's going down memory lane today, of give the enemy dilemmas, not problems. Yeah, that's
right.
One topic I did want to hit on, which is, again, since talking about all things military, one of the roles I had was in counterintelligence, and part of that was safeguarding highly classified information. So I just wanted to chime in really quickly on some food for thought, keeping the politics out of this, about declassifying information and highly sensitive information and what it means. So there was information from the Second World War which was kept classified for a long time afterwards. There's some reasons for that. And you might say, wow, that's in the past and the like. Well, not always. When I look at the most sensitive information today, and that's what's being talked about in this press-worthy sort of stuff that's going on right now, one thing that's often forgotten is sources and methods. That a lot of this information, which is so highly, the conclusion may not be a big deal. It may be like, this incident never occurred, so fine, this is not a big deal for us anymore. But the way we got that information, our methods, that's going to continue. It's like if you disclose your social security number, you can't get that back. So this was the concern about Snowden with his disclosures, a separate topic. Right. But the concern inside the organizations was the methods, and some of those methods were compromised, taking apart. So these are not analogous circumstances in many ways, but this one they are. So if you have some way of collecting stuff and your enemy doesn't know about it, you lose that, it's gone. So if you do a casual declassification or an inappropriate one, you can lose that, and it could be billions of dollars lost. The worst case is the sources. When you burn those, is people die. Yeah. There is great, well-documented history showing that when sources get burned, lots of people die. Cambridge 5 were great examples, and the body count for what they disclosed to the Soviets was in the possibly thousands of people died as a direct result of what they disclosed. Yes, the Cadbury secret, the 7 herbs and spices, that's one aspect of it. But there's also, it creates a culture then that this is not something to be safeguarded or can be treated casually. And the reality is the opposite, that for the level of documents that are being discussed in this, you could not even view those outside of a special room.
Right.
Let alone transport them, and the processes to declassify those also always looked at sources, methods, and what would the impact be on the organization and the country if you did that. So just the concept of being able to, somebody to casually do it, and yes, you can direct it being done, but it's a complicated thing. But the real life impacts of that most sensitive stuff, and it is that most sensitive stuff for a freaking reason. So yeah, when I look at all the people who've gone to jail, rightly so, for being casual with the stuff, even single documents, it's hard for people who've worked in that business to look at these kinds of poor handling of documents. And I'll paint a broad brush, not just one individual. I'll say poor handling of the most sensitive stuff with executives. Top down, the top should do better. But just anyway, it's just for people. I talked to old colleagues, who worked in that business with the most sensitive stuff, and it's just it's just shocking. It's up, it's just hard to fathom how that can be treated casually, and it just it's just shocking to people who worked in that business. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah,
And how do you jumpstart that level of empathy? How do you, how do you take an irresponsible individual in a senior position and make them aware of the consequences of their carelessness? I mean, do you, invite them to spend an afternoon with the family of a source who was executed by the other side? I mean, what can we possibly do to, you know, raise awareness of the seriousness of this stuff?
right, right. So people who claim to love their country, claim to love the troops, you know, don't do that. So yeah, and again, having been on the other side of it, I know firsthand of generals that had careers ended and had a really bad time of it because they were casual about it. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, there was a very small spectrum of difference of treatment between the most senior people and the small, but it was a very small spectrum. Career still ended. It was just kind of how many days you did in the Huskow was just different, but
Yeah.
the effective outcome was the same. So yeah, just any kind like for the people who are supposed to be defending us, it's yeah, it's just it's very upside down world
Yeah.
to see that being treated casually, or the concept, even if the system was as described, that people could sort of declassify it at the highest level. Well, no, I don't think it's like that. And number two is that wow, we're all in trouble if that's
Well,
sort of
and think
offensive
about,
based.
think about the problems recruiting somebody to provide information against the country they're living in that they feel may be on a grossly bad track.
Exactly right. And then you make the job so hard of the people out there trying to recruit sources.
Yeah.
And it's, there's always this concept that intelligence officers are out there sneaking around. Well, they know they don't steal stuff. They get other people to take the secrets.
Right.
So how are you going to do that now? When there's this kind of casualness, and the level of information did have, that kind of information in there. So, whew, that
Yeah.
just made a lot of people's jobs harder. So.
Yep. Yeah. That was bleak.
Yeah, I just it's just so backwards and upside down. So yeah,
Yeah.
hard to rationalize.
A fellow I went to high school with, his mom was an analyst at the CIA. I found out many years later. And, she made passing reference to knowing one or two of the people who were behind one or two of the stars on the wall at CIA headquarters. And
Yeah, multiply that by 100 plus for their sources that also went down, and because they were friendly to the country. So
right.
yeah, and again, the level of handling. So first of all, how onerous clearances are at that level.
Yeah.
It's polygraph, right? Is part of it. At that level, you don't get a clearance without a polygraph, except for apparently at the highest levels, you don't have to abide by this. Um,
Right.
but yeah, if you have any problem in your life at all, or have had any problems in life, you are not getting that clearance and cannot come near that stuff for a good reason.
Yep.
The second level is the physical safeguarding and the electronic safeguarding of it. And at the highest levels, it's not even transmitted electronically because we don't trust those systems.
Right.
So and again, the viewing, the handling, separate physical spaces, separate floors, separate people.
Right.
It is not like the movies. It is onerous.
Yeah, that was when I look at these movies, it's like, well, that works. And then, you watch like Enemy of the State, and some official in the NSA is able to redirect a spy satellite with a single phone call. That's like, no, you can't do
Yeah.
that. The what was it, Patriot games, where they actually have to retask a satellite, and it takes like days. And the
Right.
concern is, will they be able to get it into position in time? Because the bad guys know, and they take
They watch the
countermeasures
satellites.
to
Yeah.
right. But can they get it retasked in time to get valuable intel before the bad guys know the satellite's on a new mission? Very, very, very complex, challenging problem.
I'm also concerned about, of course, when you look at Enigma, what was some of the great stuff being built on? Well, plain text, right? So all of the, great cryptanalysis efforts have been based on having plain text. So if you have plain text of documents which were protected under our most, sensitive systems, you potentially weaken those systems because now you've got plain text.
Right.
So hopefully none of these documents were transmitted electronically. I'm assuming some were, just by the number involved. So that's the next concern, is as they get compromised, then what's the impact on other documents protected with the same key sets, technologies, and the like. So just, nothing good comes from casual handling of our most sensitive stuff. That should be an easy one, but it's I think what's missed in this discussion is the fallout. That, yes, there's, privilege of executives to do maybe things differently is one discussion point, but no matter who it is, what's the impact? And that's, I think, what gets missing is real people's lives, real systems, our abilities to know what the bad guys are doing. Once you lose that edge, it's really hard to get it back. It's not something you do overnight. It's done in decades. So
right. And that to me, again, underscores this false reliance on technology. The HK satellite program cost more than the budget of the entire Central Intelligence Agency. It was in the $10 billion range.
Right.
I mean, for those, and what does the satellite give you? From 156 miles up, you can read a license plate if it's daytime and not cloudy, right? But having one person, one reliable source in the area gives you a heck of a lot more than a license plate.
Yeah, and the point we also just talked about was the cultural aspect too. That it's hard, it's not exciting to be in counterintelligence. It's always the poor, the poor stepchild of intelligence work.
Right.
And so to get, people in there to be diligent, because it's always one of those things, and until it fails badly, until you find the spies, you're seen to be doing a good job finding the spies and the moles. So motivating people to do the proper work and stay motivated in that challenging environment, you don't want to reduce that either. So I'm sad that this could demotivate the people in the counterintelligence side who are trying to find the baddies, and they're kind of saying, well, why should we even bother? Like, we can't. How do we keep people to hold their standard when we're not held up to that standard elsewise? So,
Well, yeah, that's right. That gets to an organizational thing. I mean, does the senior leadership really understand what's going on in the mid ranks, at the bottom, to be able to make the right call? Culture.
Back to your all your eggs in one basket. Taking us full circle before we finish off, Ray Wagner and I wrote a note, and one of the models that we used for sensitive data was to treat it like sort of toxic waste, right? Like, and I think back to, when you look at the TV series Chernobyl, when the inside of the reactor is seen outside, what a shock that was for reactor engineers to say that shouldn't be out here. You shouldn't see the inside bits of the reactor on the outside. And that's kind of, I think, how the intelligence and counterintelligence field is feeling right now about seeing, top secret SCI material not in the place it should be. It's almost like seeing, inside of a reactor out on the street. So it's what was that word you used before? Disappointing?
Disappointing. Yeah, disappointing. Right.
Yeah, it's very British of you to understate like that. It's very not super.
Yeah, not super. Yeah. Underwhelming. Yes.
So that takes us full circle. I think today. So great stuff, Bill. So thank you for this conversation.
Good talk, Greg. We'll do this again soon. I really enjoy our chats, and thanks to all you listeners. If you have any questions you want us to address, our email is in the trailer.
Yes, and we both had our rant today. That's good. We both feel lighter.
Indeed.
We contain fewer multitudes. So, so this is Greg Young signing off today. Thank you for listening in.
And Bill Malik saying, be well, do good, stay safe from Real Cybersecurity. I didn't even